Sometimes you need to take risks in order to stop your art from becoming stale, and those risks don't always pay off. So please enjoy the process behind my least favorite sculpture. So it's no secret, if you've seen any videos on my channel, that I like sculpting dudes. Big buff dudes.
I like dudes a lot.
So today we're doing a LOOKSMAXXING ideal. LOOKSMAXXING is now more of a meme than an actual community, although I'm sure it's both. I just want to disclaim that I'm not making fun of people that LOOKSMAXX. I think it's cool that you want to improve yourself, but I am making fun of some of the extremes. That's what I like to sculpt, is the extremes. As you can tell by the Hulk Batman I did last time. You should go see that video, it's really good. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna start with the eyes. Now, if you're really into LOOKSMAXXING, then you know what A10s are. It's basically eugenics, where all the eye colors are organized by what your destiny in life is. So lightest blue is at the top, and it's for men destined to define eras and change history, who will be remembered for millennia to come, all the way down to the brown eyes that are described as untouchable sanitation workers and street sweepers. I really hope no one uses this seriously, but if we're making the pinnacle of LOOKSMAXXING, it's a dude with A10s. I just got these eyes from Juliana Lepine. She's a fellow sculptor on YouTube. She has a shop on Etsy as well, where you can get these perfectly made resin eyes. I've tried making them myself, not that good. And also, if you flip it over, she has kindly organized it in order. And right at the top, we have perfect A10s. So we're gonna use that on this guy. I also did a little research on AI, and if you put in prompts of like hypermasculine, Giga Chad, Muse, LOOKSMAXXING with blue eyes, you get this kind of stuff. A couple times I got a dude with Fabio hair. I think I might use the face, but I'm not so sure about the Fabio hair, because as you can probably tell, I'm partial to the bald look. And we got this absolute unit of a man. I think we'll go with that. I think I'm gonna start with the face, and of course the jawline is gonna be unnecessary. This is a student of Mogwarts. It'll probably be bald or with some kind of really short hair, like a skin fade. Very symmetrical face. And I like to think that this guy had brown eyes and then surgically tattooed them to be blue, which is a thing you can do now. Don't. You could probably go blind, so don't do that. And through his meditation practice, he opened his third eye, but because it was brown, he tried tattooing it blue and it went away. This is the kind of guy we're talking about. So I think that's a first step. We're gonna make a skull. Ooh. Oh, have you seen that? Okay. There's a meme of a hunter-gatherer skull versus a modern-day skull. We'll give him a hunter-gatherer skull. He probably didn't have one to begin with. He bone smashed in order to get that positive cantle tilt. So we're gonna go with that. So with this project, I decided to start with the head separately. I made a little makeshift base out of wire and started preparing it to add the clay on top. The thinner wire that you see is just so that everything sticks a little easier. There's more texture for the clay to stick to the wire. I made a basic kind of skull shape that I could add on top of. The clay I use for this is usually dirty Super Sculpey that I don't care if it looks finished towards the end. And like I mentioned before, I'm using a hunter-gatherer skull as a basis for this thing, which is just because from a shape theory standpoint, it does look more masculine, and any features that you add on top of it, it'll be a lot easier to keep that same vibe. While I was working on this guy, I had a lot of internal monologuing going on where I was just kind of trying to come up with a lore or a story, because a lot of the fun is just finding reasons to put things in your project. And this guy, I had to come up with what he did for a living first. I thought that was the most important part, because he's on the hyper masculine LOOKSMAXXING side of the internet. I thought he'd definitely be some form of CEO, and what better form of CEO than running a private community for learning how to be a CEO. It costs about 100K a month to be a member of his group. One of his most popular courses is how to make 100K in a month. So for the facial expression, it's pretty important since the whole concept behind this was someone who improves their appearance to the point of near perfection or absolute perfection. I thought I wouldn't really give him much emotion. He's got to be pretty neutral. The idea of perfection for people who LOOKSMAXX is basically a kind of Kardashianization of the male face. Everything is very streamlined, there's no imperfection, and there's a great deal of importance on the height of cheekbones, the ratio to the jaw, and something called hunter eyes, which I didn't know about until researching this video, and it's quite interesting that there's an importance on appearing very menacing and masculine, especially since the character I'm making is deeply insecure about his appearance, which is kind of a contradiction toward the idea that your appearance is masculine and self-assured. I only say that because this character is supposed to be someone who, if you took away his $10,000 self-improvement program that he does every day, it would really ruin him and he wouldn't know who he was anymore. Take a good look, because this is the last time this guy looks normal. I took a look at this guy and thought he kind of looks not strange enough. I'm trying to make a caricature of ideas, so I decided to add a third eye that was closed. Like I mentioned before, the idea is that because he originally had brown eyes and made them blue because they weren't perfect, by the time he had managed to open his third eye through meditation, it was brown like his eyes are supposed to be, and he decided to fix that and it permanently shut. It was finally time to get started on the body. Like I'd mentioned before, he definitely does meditation, and so I thought I'd add on top of that it's part of his millionaire CEO morning routine, because you can't be one without a morning routine. After doing about 2 hours of skincare, he can finally start his meditation, which he does because he's trying to shift to his ideal reality, which is him being the leader of a small hunter-gatherer group in prehistorical Earth. Unbeknownst to him, all the other members of his tribes are also CEOs who are shifting to their ideal reality. This is by far my favorite part, where I got to start shaping his physique. Like I'd mentioned before, he needs to have a V taper. Any self-improvement video that talks about looking better involves a lengthy weightlifting program on how to get your shoulders as wide as possible and your waist as small as possible. So I thought it was only right that this guy had the greatest V taper I've ever seen in my life. The neck had to be thick but not too thick, because there's a balance between being visually pleasing and being masculine, and those two are often at odds with each other. An extremely thick neck gives the appearance of masculinity, but this guy doesn't want to look like he's brutish. He wants to look graceful. So a very long, thick neck is how you achieve that. Because I've heard people talk about the V-tapers so much, I can list off by heart what it takes. You just need to focus a lot on the shoulders, upper chest, and arms. Everything else is more or less unimportant. There's a big focus on the lats as well, but most people focus on the chest and arms and shoulders because they are the mirror muscles, and they're what you notice yourself when you're assessing your V-taper the most. I know the question on your mind is this achievable naturally? Probably, but I can tell you this guy absolutely is not natural. He's on a steroid cycle that would put Liver King to shame. The abs are also obviously very important, and I thought I'd channel some Giga Chad with his abs. I wanted them to be ridiculously defined, very small abs that you could just stack on top of each other. At this point, I realized I definitely was on the right track, because as soon as I put a little piece of hair on his head, he looked like the Chad meme. And I think that's when I decided to deviate from my original plan to make him bald, and I decided to just give him a skin fade but with the plumage on top of his head, because I really liked the fact that it was very reminiscent of the meme. It was also very important to make him as vascular as possible, because that seems to be another aspect of aesthetic bodybuilding. I was also just looking for an excuse to make veins, because they seem to be something I really enjoy adding onto sculptures, making the little worms and then just methodically adding them on. And by this point, he was looking about done when it came to the physique, which meant that I could start on the lower body. I decided not to add any significant amount of detail. I just gave him a simple cross-legged pose and left it to be pretty bare, just because I wanted the focus to be on the upper body, and by this point I was also running out of steam when it came to my patience. This is also when I decided to add the watches. I don't know where the idea came from. I think it's when I realized that his wrists were too long and that I could probably try to cover it up, and then the idea came that, you know, if he's big on demonstrating his wealth, then he would have a watch, and I thought maybe he wasn't sure how to authenticate his watches, so he just got as many as possible, just so that statistically at least one of them would be authentic. I decided to put him in something that's basically a cross between a muscle shirt and a tank top. So all I really needed to do was make a line where his collar and sleeves cut off, and then that's it, because it's so tight that you can see his nipples and his muscles through it. Then it was time to paint, and I started with the pants and went straight to the skin tone. It was pretty easy, just a wash. I went as light as possible with the skin tone because this guy is not getting a lot of sun, and it was also at this point that I could start finally accentuating the third eye, because I thought from a bunch of different angles you can't really see it that well, so adding a wash in the creases was important. I also added some red in the nose and cheek area and the eyes just to give him a bit of life. This is the point where he started having a little bit of personality to him, and I tried to accentuate it as much as possible and bring as much focus to the eyes as possible as well. So I put a gloss over the resin eyes just so that they would pop a little bit more, and with the other colors I went very minimal. So his tank top was the same blue as his pants, but the paint I used had a weird sheen to it, so I decided to go over it with some mini paints to kind of dull it down a little bit. And then it was time for the hair. I went with a layer of blonde, but then I decided dark brown would go a little bit better, and I attempted to give him a skin fade with some gray that went over his scalp, but it didn't really work. It was finally time for the watches. I just went with a regular leather over the straps and then varied some gold, bronze, and a couple different types of silver to try and vary the textures and colors a little bit. And for the watch faces, I decided to go with black and then a gloss on a couple of the different blacks just to break it up. And the final touch was fixing the burn mark on his right hand. I decided to make it gold, kind of imply that he's becoming a more valuable substance than human flesh. And after that, I thought it was time for a check-in on how I was feeling about this guy. This thing is terrible. I could call it done. I could say it's good like that, but the colors are a little too simple. I don't like how it turned out. I think it's okay, but it could be better. Maybe I could add some psychedelic elements or something. I think the problem with this guy is that you can't really communicate the things I want to make fun of visually that easily. I mean, the pose is very Buddhist and, you know, trying to make him look like he's some evolved human being by sheer self-hate. But I think it's okay as it is, but we could go weirder. Could go a lot weirder. Like, it's not even slightly weird yet. It's just some dude with a gold hand and very long wrists. Maybe he could be like levitating things with some purple energy stuff. Yeah, let's go with that. Wish me luck. So in order to achieve that unearthly feeling, I used hot glue that I made weird shapes with and then painted using some translucent purple just to try and give it a magical feel organically. I layered it on top of some wire so that I could kind of control the shape and wrap it around him a little bit and make it feel like he's summoning it around himself. Okay, this thing is weird. Very strange. I think I'm just gonna call it there. I could add stuff. I could make it a bit more. I could put some other kind of props and things, but I think I'm gonna leave it there. I do like the face. I like the ridiculous V-taper. I'm not sure how I feel about the Mog magic that is emanating from his posterior chain. All in all, I think it's okay. It's not my favorite. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.